The final session of the first day of the conference, and to prepare ourselves for the excitement of the gala dinner and the dancing competition, which there isn't one, don't worry. It's my great pleasure to introduce Phil and Philip, and you'll notice there, and have read, I suppose, or hope their profiles, so I'm not going to go through that anymore, except to draw your attention to the fact that Phil has one of his interests as crocodile wrestling. So I don't know whether he's going to cover that in his talk, but I'd certainly like to know more about that. Susie, my exec colleague, and I actually got invited to observe what you're going to hear about in the next half an hour, this SimEx exercise, which is a massive simulation exercise that runs over several days across the city of Portsmouth. We went to observe it and were just amazed at what was going on. So we felt that we would invite them along to tell you about what they do and their learning from it, because it's a very different example of where simulated practice can make huge change to the way that healthcare is delivered. So without further ado, I'll introduce the double act and pass you on to them.
I suppose I should check if everyone can hear me. Yeah. It's a double act. You can't be on the stage on my own. So I'm Phil. This is Philip. Philip is very rarely called Phil, and I'm very rarely called Philip. Only when I'm very naughty. I'll talk about the crocodiles at another time, maybe. But I did actually wrestle a crocodile, for those of you that actually bother to read the bio, which I don't think anyone ever does, do they? So today we're going to talk about secure quality simulation across multi-agencies. This is, as Andy alluded to earlier on, based around an exercise that's been running in Hampshire for 6 years now. The next 2018 exercise, which we're presently in the depths of planning, will be in May of 2018. That will be the 7th time it's run. It's gone from being a very small, posh tabletop to facilitate one particular master's course to a much larger arrangement of up to 50 or so different organisations with around 2,500 participants. Whilst we will use that as the example for what we're going to talk about, and we'll break down a little bit more in a second how we're going to do that, it's only an example of what we're trying to get the message across. So that exercise gives us a vehicle to give you examples of why we think we're doing, or what we're doing is a way forward that you might think about for your own organisations. I need to press buttons, don't I? So, who are we? Philip Gaffney is the CEO of the L2S2. We'll come back to Phil slightly later in the exercise, and he'll talk about the evaluation, the assessment, the data collection tools, and how that's all put into the exercise, how that then comes out of the exercise to form useful learning for not only the organisations at the exercise, but for other organisations that may be involved with this. And Phil will detail some of the things he's been involved with, but L2S2 is a lead agency within the SimEx Series, and the software packages that that company provide are already in use with UK emergency medical teams. My name's Phil Crook. I'm one of the co-directors for SimEx Series, have been for, say, coming up to 7 years. But my day job is as a fire officer in Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service. I'm also part of the United Kingdom Search and Rescue Team, which is a group of people that go overseas after things like earthquakes, tsunami, heavy storms, that sort of thing. There is also another person who should have been here. She's not, and she left Phil and I in the... sorry, she couldn't make it, so we've taken over. So Naomi Morris, who you can see there, she works for the University of Portsmouth. She's also a paramedic, and she's the other co-director for the SimEx exercise. She's in Niger at the moment with one of her other hats on, which is working for the United Nations, coordinating some medical response in a part of the world that is not very pleasant to be in at the moment. On top of which, just at the minute, she's got a bit of a bout of something called malaria. A couple of days she'll be okay, I'm sure. I'm sure she would have loved to have been here. So why are we telling you about this? The vision of SimEx. There's lots of things that we align to, lots of things that we're trying to do. We have aligned with the Leading Edge Simulation and Training Network. That's a United Nations structure. Leading Edge is the organisation the UN uses to present itself in other than the UN format. which allows us to get into the global picture, if you like. Both Naomi and myself are members of the Secretariat that facilitate that. So all the learning and all the objectives and the structures that we put in this, we could feed into the United Nations system, which is obviously hopefully beneficial. It also gives us the ability to learn from others that are in the same structures. So it's a two-way street. Clearly, we want to improve emergency preparedness, and we want to present high-quality training. Anybody running an exercise is going to want those two objectives on their list. We're lucky in that the way it's gone, we're able to coordinate both local, regional, national, international organisations into the team, into the exercise participants. The exercise runs in two structures, basically. We have a national element, which is basically local and national structures, responding how they would do to whatever scenario we put on for the particular event we're doing. But we also run an international scenario, which allows organisations from all over the world that would respond to the particular scenarios we have to come along and play as well. We hopefully putting on a platform that could be replicated other places, could be recognised as a good way of doing things. That's the whole reason for us doing it. But it also allows us to evaluate throughout the exercise itself and both before and after in the way that we collect data. And Philip will talk a little bit more about that on that part of it. And then again, obviously, the reliable data in real time during the scenario. And obviously, we want to make our response as good as we can do. Just a quick overview of how complex this can get. The national element, and this is looking forward to the 2018 exercise, presently involves those organisations. There's a couple more that are not on, will be added to that, have contacted me this week and wish to come and play. That runs on day one, as you can see, from 10 till around 6 o'clock in the evening. It's about 8 hours of constant exercising. That's the practical element of it. As you'll see later on, there's before and after to that, which also is facilitated by the way that we run the exercise, and I'll explain that a little bit later with another slide. On the international side of things, obviously it's international, slightly more organisations involved. I think there's 27 on this sheet there, and I am aware of probably another 10 that definitely do want to come, and probably another 10 or so that are considering whether or not they'll come to participate next year or whether or not they'll just come to observe. Generally, people come and have a look, and then the next year they come and play. Or they jump in with their feet and go straight to being a participant. That's a 3-day exercise. Starts at the same time as the national exercise on day one, but it continues 24/7 through the night for 2 days through to day 3, around 1300 in the afternoon on day 3, which gives us enough time for some very brief debriefing on scene before then people disappear back to wherever they're going. And you can see the range of organisations. There's a lot of acronyms around there, and if you don't know anything, please write it down at the end. I'll try and decipher those for you if I can. So the structure we put on that. Structure for 2018 looks a little bit like this. That looks really simple. But if you think about lead agencies, there's only 4 of them. Philip's one of them, I'm one of them. Naomi will be with Portsmouth University. The other one that's there is RED-R, which is the Registered Engineers for Disaster Relief. They will be running the international non-governmental organisation elements of the international exercise. Very well recognised organisation, and they bring a lot to the party this year. This year is their first, or 2018 will be their first year playing. Sat beneath that, we've got a committee. Breaking out from the committee, we have a planning team for the actual operations side of it, and then we have the evaluation team, which is the data collection, assessment, evaluation, etc. The evaluation side of it leads into academia, which we'll talk about a little bit more, which is Naomi's part of it, if you like, and to a certain extent Philip's part as well. And obviously the operational part of the evaluation will be what each participating organisation will evaluate their own personnel and their own personnel's performances and their own team's performances. And then under the planning team, we break into national and international. Some of us are lucky enough to sit on both sides of that, but we also have individuals which will be specific to certain functions, certain capabilities that sit under just national or just international. So beneath both of those, we have bilateral working groups. Presently, in the national structure, there are 5 bilateral working groups, each of which have several organisations. So this one little box here is probably, on a planning stage, somewhere in the region of 50 or 60 people. So you can see how big everything else would be. It's a massive beast, huge monster. Does take some organising, but we get there. Locations, just a quick overview. This is a map of south-central Hampshire. Everyone would recognise that. Those of you that are not from the UK, it's on the nice part of the UK, right down the bottom end, south, tropical area. But you can see the number of places that we're going from. Several fire stations in there, some military sites, university locations, some old, previously used military historical sites. We've even got quite a little bit of activity going on out in the Solent on the water. So the scenario for 2018 is a weather scenario. Previously, we've had earthquakes, we've had tsunamis, just about every biblical disaster you can imagine, we've done it. This year, it's going to be a very low pressure, slow moving weather formation. So if you think about what happened in Texas not too long ago, this is kind of that, but done British style, which is better than Texas, much bigger. One of the advantages of this particular scenario is that it's what we call a rising tide incident, so we know it's coming. The Met Office, which provided this particular slide, is one of the lead players. They're giving us a lot of information, practicing some of the things that they would do. With an event like this, you would have fairly reliable information, probably up to 5 days beforehand, about what's going to happen. So whilst we've got a practical exercise running on a Tuesday, and the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the international aspect, we've also got the ability to notionally practice things from 5 days beforehand. And there are several organisations taking advantage of that. Certainly my own organisation, Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, will be planning from the Friday, what are we going to do if 2 or 3 of our fire engines are under 6 foot of water? What are we going to do if main transport routes are under 6 foot of water? It's something that they can plan for. They've never had the chance to do it, so we're going to do it. We're going to move fire engines around as if they are assets that need to be relocated to maintain our operational capability. It's not very often that an exercise will facilitate such things. Equally, post the event, what things do you have to think about? 6 foot of water used to be in this fire station. What do we have to do to this fire station now to bring it back to an operational state of readiness? Environmental agencies, another organisation playing that game, they're looking at which roads they have to be able to protect, what vital services, what critical national infrastructure they need to protect. All these are things that are happening in a notional way, but it's an exercise. It's an addition to the exercise that wouldn't be there generally in many other examples of this. So, benefits. Well, the scenario initially, first off, is relevant to everybody. We've chosen this particular scenario for 2018 because it ticks the boxes for lots of local resilience forum. It ticks the boxes for lots of local emergency services, including the police, medical, fire service, but also other Cat 1 responders, other Cat 2 responders. We've got several businesses that want to play on that notional side of it as well. We've got some of the organisations that have recently contacted me from Rest Centre, Red Cross. We have an organisation just recently contacted us wanting to play called the Portsmouth Pastors, which is a Christian charity that will support people if they're out of their house and they've got nowhere to go. They all want to play, so it all is relevant to all those different organisations. Maybe in slightly different ways with different perspectives, but as a causative factor, it's something that would affect everybody. For me, the major, and I'll come back to this again, the major benefit is that we're bringing lots and lots of different organisations, lots and lots of different people, individuals from each of those organisations together to play at one scenario. As it says there, we're very good. I expect every one of your organisations is extremely good at exercising in isolation. And there's a need for that. You want to practice the minutiae, as we called it a little bit earlier on when we had a chat. You want to get that right on your own. But you also want to be able to take that and practice it in something that simulates what would actually happen if this was to really take place. And more often than not, we don't do that. More often than not, we exercise without interacting with other agencies that would most definitely be there. We don't take account of their perspectives. We don't take account of their needs and the things that they have to have happen for them to be able to be successful at types of incidents such as this. And we should do that. We do not do that enough. And that's a global problem. One of the reasons that's a global problem is people perceive it as a financial issue. Actually, if you look at this from the correct perspective, you can save a lot of money by doing this. You bring a lot of organisations together in one go. You save money. There's cost efficiencies because of the nature of the number of things that you duplicate, the number of things where places overlap of scenarios, overlap of injects, overlap of management for the exercise, overlap of resources for the exercise. It can seem like a very big thing to do, and trust me, it is daunting. Every year on the Monday night, I do not sleep before 4 days of not sleeping because of the intimidating nature of the size of this exercise. But from a group of individual organisations coming together, this is a fantastic way to exercise. You can get exercise objectives out of this that you would never be able to do on your own or even in small groups of organisations. The cross-agency learning, the development opportunities, it's as close as you can get to doing it for real. And after-action documents, so all the debrief documents, everything like that, and Philip will talk more about those in a second, they're all accessible. Every organisation, one of the agreements to come to play with this is that everybody gets to see what you did right, everybody gets to see what you did wrong, because everybody will learn from that. I know that Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service has seen things that other organisations did wrong and said, whoa, we do that, and that is what will happen if we do it. So we're not going to do that anymore. So we've learned from other people's mistakes, which is much more fun than learning from your own. I'm going to pass to Phil.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of talking to you. It's fun to meet. I've been around the exhibition today. It's really interesting to see how many different diverse areas of simulation are being performed. And you're very much, every group, and it's like our groups, to a large extent you train on your own. And one of the benefits of this exercise is that it's an opportunity for all of us to train together. And therefore, partly learning how to actually act together when there's no time to prepare is a very important attribute to gain. I started in this, I lead a group of people in Cambridge who build mobile medical platforms for use in the health service and the ambulance service. We've been doing it for quite a long time. We have a lot of accreditations. We decided 2 years ago that we probably could contribute to disaster aid and to go out with field hospitals with the UK emergency medical team that's being put together under the WHO. And about September, a year and a bit ago, we proposed to the UKMT that we believe we could do what they were doing better than they could do it. And despite being cheeky, they said, go on then, we'll let you prove it and come along and show us at Christmas. And we went to the simulation of a Type 2 hospital at Christmas where there are nearly 300 outpatients a day and 20 beds. And 300 people are on the voluntary list from the NHS who come with the team and deploy to disaster, whether it be in Sierra Leone looking at Ebola or going to Nepal for earthquake. Or Haiti. And that team is extremely skilled and it draws the very best out of the NHS. And we went with them to the exercise as suppliers. And during the course of the exercise, 4 minutes after it started, we realised that we could transform how it was working. And that's quite exciting for engineers. And my background, scientist and engineer, not a doctor. I'm a doctor, but wrong sort. A real doctor, the only one in the room. The consequence of this is that within 4 minutes, we could see that there were several products that we'd never dreamt of that it would help immeasurably, almost instantly. And within a few weeks of leaving that meeting, 2 things happened. We signed up as volunteers to deploy with them because we decided the only way we would learn how it works is to become totally immersed and involved. And secondly, we built and launched the first of the products that actually dealt with patient registration and tracking. And I met Naomi, met Phil as a result of that, and within weeks we were actually brought into SimEx 217. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we learned and how we've taken it forward and what we're trying to achieve this year. The 3 circles that were on the screen were showing that there are 3 real areas. We're looking at helping with operational management. We're helping with the clinical tracking, so looking after patients, tracking them through the camp, making sure we have the right resources matched to the right people, moving them to different medical facilities, and tracking them out of the system to make sure that we're looking after people properly. And finally, we are gaining training and learning from this exercise, so collecting data is vital, that we can gather all the information from nearly, 2,500 people? So there'll be 2,500 people next year. We haven't told you that. 450 role players, which are medical students. I mentioned this on at lunch. I spotted 2 types. We have medical students coming in, and we have actors, which might be medical, but they are definitely drama students. And you can tell which you're talking to because one will actually say, I've got pulse rate of this, and I've got this, and the other will go, ah! And the screaming is actually something that was new to us. We'd never seen it before. So the first thing that happened for my team was actually being at a hospital that seemed like any other hospital, and the whistle blew for the start of the simulation, and the noise was off scale. People were screaming, people were in distress, there were people dying all around us, and we'd never seen that before, and the doctors had never seen that before, not at the scale that we were simulating on our first event, an earthquake that had injured 86,000 people and had killed 26,000. We were one of 5 hospitals treating those patients in the first days. Almost everybody coming in those circumstances, purely medical, will die without help. So that's why the nature of the event changes. And we decided we needed to learn much more than we could learn by one or maybe one deployment every 1 year, every 2 years. We were never going to learn enough from actually going out into the field before we got there. We needed to actually have an opportunity to learn. We became involved in the SimEx. And the SimEx, earlier this year, in May, was fabulously helpful. We actually were asked a few weeks before it started to collect data from the SimEx, no real specification. And we collected the data from about 40 mobile devices, because that's all we could afford to put into the simulation. And the data in real time allowed us to see what was going on. We were able to test the tools we'd built for the UK emergency medical team. And we knew where the patients were. We could see them coming in on boats out on the Solent. We could see them landing on the beaches, being moved into the medical facility. And we could actually see as the observations happening in real time. And the equipment is low cost, but it's specialist. It's approved for having patient data. The first things that came through was that in the past we've never collected data. There's very little historical data collected from real casualty events because it's too difficult to record the data. People are dealing with panic, dealing with very tight timescales, and all of the note-taking, everything that you've planned to do goes out the window. And it's clear to us you can't design tools the sort that we build for hospitals for the real world for going out and collecting data in disaster. If all of you were actually volunteer doctors and you were in hospitals all over the UK, we would have spent a few weekends sleeping in tents together and working, practicing. But when you actually get deployed, you would come together, and the thing that's totally different to the hospital medicine is the patients are already there. So when you arrive, people are screaming, people are actually dying in front of you, and the doctors start to react immediately. And I see total professionalism from the doctors that we go out with. They react immediately, but that means there's no data being collected. So we've had to redesign all the tools to be usable without training. We've had to design all the tools to be usable the second you switch it on. It has to start working, and it has to tell you what to do first. In panic, you might forget to take the name of the patient, some information. The tools start off in a very dictatorial way. It says, enter this, enter this, enter this. And almost immediately, then it lets you use your skills and take over and to drive it freehand. But we aim to get 100% data capture from the tools that we use of a small data set that allows us to actually know what's going on in real time. Beyond that, we get the best data fit that we can get. So we encourage people, we make it easy, we make it quick. But largely, we expect to get very good quality data from a small amount of data and fill in data where we can get it. It worked. I mean, that was a really excitement for us because we were hoping it would work, and it worked extremely well. We handed it to people who'd never seen us before, never knew it was coming. They queued up to collect the equipment at one end of the building, they left at the other, and it worked. They collected the data, and we've produced a report which will go onto the website for this year, which is 180 pages long. The system, the mobile devices collect photography, they collect the GPS locations of where you took it, they take the patient details, and they work whether you're online or offline. So if this is one of the devices, just a phone, it always works, and it's instantaneous and it's quick. As you walk around and it gets another snippet of connectivity, it will upload to the secure service, and it ends up in the medical record. One of the things that is different here is that we've got devices at the front end which have not got identifiable data, so it's very easy to get the governance, but they are cleverly locked through and approved straight through to a proper medical record. And in the UK, for example, we can push patient data. The patient can tap on the keyboard and push it straight into System 1, into the GP systems, because we've put in place all of the technology that makes that safe. It's exactly that system that we take out into the field for the emergency medical team, and the one that we use for this. Right. We've learnt a huge amount, and I think this is what simulation does for you. We took away lots of lessons. We've had meeting after meeting analysing the data. We've done more mini simulations on our own. So we've been out and done simulation after simulation. The next big simulation for us next weekend is actually with EMT, and again another one in December. And then we have meetings in January, and finally, I think May next year, the SimEx will start. And we're trying to be very much more prepared. these are the things that we added. The first thing was that we can't afford enough equipment. This is not high budget. So we can't buy 2,500 iPhones and hand them out. We hand out about 40 devices to the key operational people who have already told how to use them. So we actually know that the key things we must record, we've dealt with. We've turned the medical software into apps that are now on the App Store and on the Play Store. And we've built systems that, I've got a prop actually. You can download and print out wristbands, you can download the app, and our volunteers are going to be encouraged to actually download, create their own dashboard and play. And we actually let them do that for free off the store. Because what we've learned is that actually everybody who volunteers to go out overseas, everybody who comes and joins on Phil's exercise, are prepared to put the time in. They're actually passionately involved in what they're doing. So there's no problem getting people to engage if we can give them the tools. Therefore, it's approved for bring your own device. So you can put it onto your iPhone or your Android phone. And I'm hoping this time we will collect data from both the formal observers, but also, if I move on the slide, that's what it looks like. We will actually, on your phone, if you aim the phone at the wristband, put a wristband on the patient's wrist, turn your phone on, take the photograph, it will, in less than a second, decide it's got the number from the QR code. The questions come up, you tap in the answers to the questions, hit save, and immediately it just says, I'm done, and now you move on to the next patient. And we've got it down to a few seconds. That's used by the emergency medical team to collect the initial registration of patients. We have no idea who they are. They've turned up through the door. As soon as that's clicked, they're on a big screen in the command and control. The command and control know how many patients, whether they're male, female, pregnant, alive, dead, or need special help and assistance. But it also starts the medical records, so that now when they get to the next doctor, 30 feet further forward, their tablet computer, which is again is a medically approved device but we use for collecting all the data, it's now already got the patient's initial demographics. They don't have to retype it, you don't have to enter the data. It's a bit better than the NHS generally. It fills in the top of the form, it sticks the QR code on the form, and you can aim the tablet and aim it at their wristband and go, okay, I've got the right patient, I won't whip the wrong leg off, and it's quite safe. That is updating the screen, and as the patient moves to the next part of surgery and to the next, we track them through. In the UKMT, we use this for medical and for operational management, so we actually can steer the resources. We've got a very big problem with the SimEx. We have professional agencies who collect their own data in different ways, they use different forms, they have different objectives. And they collect high-value data from just attending the SimEx. It's as Phil said, it's a cheap way, relatively speaking, of them collecting that information. What this allows us to do is to put an umbrella over all the organisations and to collect data that allows us to actually learn from the act of organising a simulation. So whereas an individual agency will practice how they handle patients, how they bring the fire engines to scene, this is actually looking at how you can manage a simulation, but more importantly, how to manage a field hospital when you deploy with 170 tons of equipment into somewhere hostile, and to be fully functional in 72 hours. That requires very skilled management, and management needs data. Without the data, it's guesswork.
LOC throughout is now GCS 10. Okay.
This is what we get by living with the teams that we work with. This is a very short clip just showing that in fact it's on a beach, it's on the water. Not for us yet, but it could easily be in the future. You could actually be in a hostile area overseas or with contagious disease. The kit that we designed for the UK cannot be used. You can't take something out of the NHS and just take it into these environments and expect it to work. If you drop your expensive piece of equipment onto the gravel, that's the end of it. Whereas actually, this will work wherever we go. And we're learning from these exercises, which are very real. It rains, it freezes. It didn't rain too bad last year. It was pleasant, sort of. It's a very good way of doing it, and we go with it because that way the guys who I actually make design the kit have to go with it and prove that it works. So if they go out to next year, we get deployed somewhere exciting or exotic, if I go or they go, then it's up to us to keep the kit working. And I think the simulation environment, making friends with all the different agencies and all the people, there is a responsibility everybody gives to everybody else, and I've found that fabulously since we've joined the team. That it's a very nice bunch of people to work with. It's quite fun weekends. But I think more importantly, we can actually see real improvement in the course of just 3 days. There will be a huge amount of learning. Right, operational. When we started, and we first started, we didn't have this tool. And taking out my pocket, that's all we need to give to a nurse or to someone at the gate to let patients into the site. And just sticking a wristband on and taking the photograph came between Christmas and May when we went to the SimEx. It allows us to know where everybody is. And that had not been realised by any of the groups that were actually going out into the field previously. It was patients, you're sitting there, you're running a hospital, everybody's drinking tea, the whistle blows, and all mayhem breaks out. And everybody behaved competently and professionally, and they guided the patients, and they identified by looking around who was actually needing immediate attention. The difference was that the command and control had no idea what was going on. And you couldn't make sure that the right number of fire and rescue people were in the right place. You couldn't make sure anything was happening. That is now dealt with. We have a dashboard, we have a map, it shows where the patient is, what's happening. Strategic information, this is really where it comes into its own. Overall, in any event, there has to be central management that's actually over the different organisations. I think Phil said people try very hard to talk to each other, and the agencies do individuals talk. The problem is it's not formalised, and each agency works separately. When we come together, there is no current single system that would allow the agencies to talk to each other, that will allow us to work sensibly. People are running around the camp telling people what to do. They're using VHF radio. IT can solve it, and therefore the SimEx is a vital tool for us to actually be able to practice and to learn and to watch things happening and to be able to resolve these issues so that we can get a central command and control that can see at an instant what's going on. You don't tend to have this in a hospital. In normal hospitals, people come through the door and there's a very prescribed way to move forward. Lastly, this is the area I spend most time in, and I think most of the people I've spoken to today are involved in the hospitals. Casualty management is really, it's vastly better organised with electronics. And the other thing that I think has dropped out of what we've been doing is that there is an increasing expectation of you to be able to prove that you did the right thing with the patient. And even if we go to someone else's country, we deserve to show them the same level of respect as you would show to your patients in the UK. And if we're going somewhere and you're taking serious decisions about their health and about their care, then it's appropriate and proper to keep records. And you cannot do it unless we can get the time it takes to collect those records to a tiny fraction of what you would have if you were sitting in an office in England or in your hospital. It has to be a tool that's useful to the person on the ground to allow them to do their job more efficiently. So they feel they're getting a gain. They have to feel that it's quicker to register the patient by snapping. But that's what we're trying to learn. And I think the SimEx is a very worthwhile activity. And pass back to Philip, or to Phil, for training and exercise. Is that all right?
Yep. Okay.
Right, thank you.
Yes, so one of the other side effects we talked about and the link to academia and development opportunities, training opportunities, both in universities, bachelor's level courses, master's level courses, PhD training. Some of this I'll touch on again in a second, is that the exercise will facilitate that. My own example, 2 years ago, and I get to do this because I'm the exercise organiser, my master's degree got a lot of data from this exercise. Very fortunate I can do that. However, last year we had, I think, 5 or 6 masters using data from that exercise, and there were a couple of PhD students that also used some of the data that was collected towards their projects. It's a situation where good practice can be identified, it can go back into academia, and they can look and interrogate it, investigate what is good, what is not so good, what produces results, and they can show evidence from where we were to where we are, and that can lead over to other organisations to improve in the same way. Development setup, both from the sorts of things that Philip was talking about in the evaluation, there needs to be an awful lot of communication prior to the exercise to make sure that all the tools that Philip designs ask the right questions. We are evaluating the right objectives. So there's a lot of organisation, a lot of liaison between organisations beforehand, not just to set the questions right, but also to set the injects and the scenarios that come out of that causative factor that we discussed, that give the attending or participating organisations the chance to meet what they want to do. And again, that link to academia. Firstly, there's a transparency there on how other organisations benefit. So that can be looked at not just from the organisations, but from the academic world as well. development of training programs, both in preparedness for the exercise for some personnel and after the exercise because of what the exercise has highlighted. There's a couple of examples I've put up there. One is Resilience Direct and Hazard Manager. You're probably aware what Resilience Direct is. It's an information management tool the UK uses for holding, distributing information on a day-to-day basis, but also during incidents, has a mapping function. There is some functionality being changed at the moment, due for release towards the end of this year. And some of the aspects of last year's exercise have informed on those changes. One of the other things that came out of last year's exercise is actually nobody knows how to use it very well. So, right, well, in readiness for this year's exercise, we'll put on some training days. And we've got Resilience Direct experts to come down, hosted by, fortunately, the Ordnance Survey, which is a participator, our lead agency was in Resilience Direct because of the mapping function, to come and do some training for those that need to use it. In fairness, I'm supposed to be able to use it on a day-to-day basis, and I'm not really very familiar with it. And I probably use it more than most people do. So if I don't know how to do it, then the people that do need to do it operationally do need to be better prepared than they are at the moment. Hazard Manager is a Met Office supplied tool that Cat 1 responders can use in using weather data to help forecast various different aspects of what's going to happen over the next few days in regards to what the weather will do to their incident. The role players, Philip briefly touched on that. If we look specifically at some of the student nurses and some of the public service college students that come along as role players for the examples, take the student nurses. Many of the student nurses associated with the University of Portsmouth and Queen Alexandra Hospital in Portsmouth will be given a scenario. This is what your casualty will have happened to you. And it may be that there's a collapsed building on top of them. It may be that they're out in the middle of the Solent for 5 hours in freezing water. Whatever scenario they get, they design their casualties response to that. And that's a part of their education, part of the development. They understand many things from that, if not just empathy towards the casualty, but also the signs, the symptoms, the way that casualty will be reacting to inputs and injects that come from the person that's dealing with them. They then become that casualty. They play that casualty in the scenario, in the exercise, which can be anything from a few minutes to some of the ones that we have for the long-term building collapse, hours or even days. They're getting something out of that they've never been able to get out before. Student nurses they're actually very good because they know what they're talking about. Public college students are all sort of 16, 17, 18-year-olds, so they're a little bit more difficult to handle. But beer generally drives them the way that we need them to go. But we also have drama students from the university, very good at acting, not so technically knowledgeable, but we can give them the information they need, and they make people really believe what is going on is happening. And a whole bunch of other role players who play as well, from 5, 6-year-old children who get to go out for a day and have a bit of fun. Very well taken care of, trust me. We've never hurt or killed one of those yet. Right the way up to elderly people, disabled people, casualties that have amputations, to be as realistic as we can for the scenarios they're going into. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, obviously there's a platform there for the various levels of qualification that you might wish to be doing as an individual. So, very quick summary, because I'm not going to repeat it all again. We talked about why, we talked about how, we've talked about the benefits. I hope we've done a good job of getting over to you why we're doing what we're doing. I hope that you will be able to take some of this back to your own organisations. I hope some of you may be able to come along and play one day. Or do something I can come along and play, because it would be nice to go the other way for a change. And we can finish with questions, Andy, if you...
Thank you very much. We're running a little bit behind, so I'll take 1 or 2 quick questions if anyone has any. Now, I know...
How far ahead do you plan your exercises in terms of scenarios for 19 and 20?
So, if I think about next year, 2018, we accumulated the participants. We put deadlines on them with a causative factor, so in this case, the low pressure weather. We have a deadline for them to say what they want to achieve from the exercise. That normally runs from June, July through to the deadline being around now. Still accumulate that information so that we can cross-reference who won the award, a big one of swans, how many organisations involved in a particular scenario. We've generally got to by the end of the year. Hopefully, there's always a few things. We can build a scenario as we do to readiness. I might be ready by early May. Inevitably, graduations where we're straight off the clock and we're 45, but that's the way it was. Yeah. Actually, some of it, this year's plan was back in 2016 even, looking forward to that.
Okay, there's a slide here, or 2 slides, with information about tomorrow. The first is that, unfortunately, due to some travel issues, our first session from Keynote, we've had to change, and it's now going to be delivered by Johan Malawana. Johan is the CEO of First, but he's also got a community company called the Healthcare Leadership Academy, which is doing really innovative work around leadership. He's going to cover a whole range of new technologies. If you look up his Wikipedia page, he's listed 78th most influential person in the NHS. Don't know what that really means, whether there's only 78 listed and he's the 78th, I'm not sure. But he's certainly a well-respected and well-known individual across the NHS, and indeed, some of you may have seen him last year as the major face of the doctors' industrial action. So I'm sure his presentation will be both thought-provoking and interesting. How do we save the most precious of things? Time. The SIG meetings are about to start. We're running a couple of minutes late, but those are where they're taking place now. So those of you attending the SIGs, please go along. And of course, the ASPiH meeting tomorrow is in Coalport Suite 2. And a quick reminder that I'm sure you don't need reminding, the gala dinner, 7:30 arrival for 7:45 start. Smart casual. Thank you very much for a great day. Have a good day tomorrow and a good gala dinner tonight. Thank you.